I always say the purest level of football is the high school level because they're not playing for big scholarships or money or anything like that. It's played for pure love of the game, and high school kids just have a lot of fun playing the game indeed. So we're going to talk about the football history of rivalries in Pennsylvania with the Pennsylvania football history guy coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pigpen, your portal to positive football history. And what a treat we have today for you. We're going to talk about some football at the high school level, one of my favorite levels, the purest level of football in my eyes, in my home state of Pennsylvania. And we have the PA football history guy is joining us to talk about this. PA football history guy, welcome to the Pigpen.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, you and I have chatted back and forth here for a while, both on social media and some emails, and you've come up with a really interesting array of topics to talk about in Pennsylvania football history. And I don't know if the rest of the country realizes what rich football we have here, and I'm excited to talk about some of these great rivalries that you pointed out because I'm very familiar with many of them. And I guess before we get going, if you want to maybe just talk a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in football history and especially Pennsylvania football history.
Yeah, it's really the intersection of two passions of mine. Football's always been a really important thing to me, something I've cared a lot about, had the opportunity to play and then move on throughout the game in different ways as I've gotten older. And then history has always been a big part of what I do as well. Have an undergraduate degree in it. So I'm not a professional in any way, but I do like to think of myself as having some background in it and some skill set associated with historical research and that kind of thing. And it kind of blends the two things I like to do. So it's been about probably a decade ago, 2011, 2012, I started doing some historical research on my alma mater and did that for a couple of years, kind of reached the natural end point where I felt like I'd found just about everything I could find. And then decided to branch out into more of a statewide thing and did some of that for a while. I didn't publish it or put it out in any way online or on social media or anything. It was just kind of something I was doing for fun, and then ended up with kind of a Google Drive that was a stockpile of data and information and stuff. And I said, there might be 3 people who are interested in this. There might be 10. I don't know. I didn't think it would be a ton of people. But I figured, somebody else might like this if I like this. And so I decided just to start putting it out there. So I'm more active probably on Twitter than on the WordPress, the blog. But that's been a goal of mine. I've said in another podcast, like that's been kind of a goal of mine to start doing more on the website as time allows. But yeah, it's just, there are lots and lots of people in Pennsylvania interested in football, obviously. In America, we like to think we're special in that way. And I think we are a little bit, but you can go anywhere in America and find people who are crazy and passionate about high school football. So it's been well received. There's been a lot of people wanting to interact, and that's been awesome. I've really enjoyed that. And so, just kind of see where it goes. It's a hobby and it's a lot of fun. So whatever happens with it happens.
Yeah, we've been following each other on social media for quite some time, and you have a great following and you have great tweets, and your website's pretty awesome too. But some of the things that I find really interesting that you do is you find old newspaper articles from around the state, and especially in the high school realm, and post them up there. A lot of the games are before you and I were around here and walking the Keystone State, but just some very fascinating, interesting articles you have. How do you find all that research on things like that?
I have a subscription to newspapers.com. It's not anything overly in depth. Now I have in the past, both with this site and, as I mentioned, the previous site with my alma mater, I have used, I've used microfilm, microfiche, that kind of things in a library. I actually went with my old site with just my alma mater. I actually went to the local newspaper and I spent a lot of afternoons there just, scrolling through microfilm from 30s, 40s, 50s, whenever it might be. But the vast majority now, once you have kids, everything kind of, the more you can do from home, the easier things get. So newspapers.com is pretty nice. It's pretty comprehensive. There are some, I guess, blind spots geographically in the state that it can be more difficult to find information from, but for the vast majority of the state, it's pretty easy to find things. So that's what I use predominantly.
Yeah, my wife always comments, I read more on newspapers.com than I read the modern day newspaper, today's paper. So
we're probably in the same boat on that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a great resource. And I don't think people that do what we do can't live without that. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into some of these rivalries that you talked about. I do believe you picked out 10 or 11 great rivalries of high school football we have around the state. And I'm really interested in hearing these, especially some of these ones from the Eastern side that I'm not as familiar with. So I'll let you take the floor here and guide us through this.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I guess just the prerequisite stuff. I didn't rank any of these. I'm going to give my opinion on probably the best one right off the bat, but that's, again, just my opinion. And there are so many that could be chosen from. And you and I are talking about, if we wanted to do a 15-hour podcast on this, we easily could. Absolutely nobody would be interested in listening to that, I'm sure. Well, I might find one or two hardcore people out there, but for the sake of brevity, I wanted to keep it to 10 to 11. I put out a tweet about a week ago, just asking, kind of crowdsourcing, just to see what, I kind of had an idea of what this list would look like, I guess, but there are additions to this list that came from that question. So it wasn't like I just asked it just to ask it. I did take some of that. And I had well over 100 responses and 63 different submissions, 63 different rivalries were submitted to me. And again, these aren't ranked, and I know I'm going to miss 35 or 40 of them that everybody's going to say, what about this? What about this? What about this? And, I tried to go for a blend of things in this list. I wanted to have a good spread geographically. Once I made this list this afternoon, I was thinking about it. And I did, and I'm going to come out front and just say it. Northeastern PA is going to be upset with me because there are awesome rivalries up there, and I just couldn't wedge them in. Old Forge, Riverside would have been a great one to add, and that's on me for not adding it. Wyoming Valley West and Berwick from back in the day especially would have been a great one to add. That's on me. Somebody replied. I got a lot of probably a dozen replies of schools that don't exist anymore, which was really cool. Obviously, I'm a history guy, but like somebody submitted Myers and Gar out of Wilkes-Barre. Great rivalries, great history, great players, and everything like that. But District 2, Northeastern PA, I kind of shorted you guys on this, and I apologize off the bat.
Well, here's the beauty of it. We do a podcast every single day. So if we want to come back and revisit some of these or have a couple more episodes of doing this, we can definitely do that. We'll do a whole episode on Northeastern
right now and do 63, 65 of these podcasts, and then we can hit basically everything.
There we go. There you go. So
that'll be the plan. But I wanted to start with a couple of my favorite submissions that were tongue in cheek, just to get started with that. Anybody who's been following high school football in Pennsylvania over the last year or so will get the inside humor on this. Somebody requested, and it got the most likes and retweets of anybody who replied to my question, and I thought it was hysterical. But somebody replied, Aliquippa versus the PIAA, because it's been a contentious state of affairs between the state organization and the program at Aliquippa. So I will leave the details of that to your listeners to Google. And then someone else said, this cracked me up too. Somebody else said, Big Spring versus Boiling Springs. So we're talking District 3, South Central Pennsylvania. Talked about how passionate the rivalry was, and then said that locally it was referred to as the Skull Bowl, which I thought was humorous as well. So I wanted to give a shout out to both of those replies because they kind of made me smile. But getting into the actual meat of the list, again, I said these aren't ranked, but this one is definitely the top one, in my opinion, in the state, and comes with a bit of an asterisk because only one of the teams is in Pennsylvania, but I think it's Easton and Phillipsburg. Phillipsburg out of New Jersey. There's so much passion behind it. And I'm going to use the word passion 85 times today, but that's what rivalries are about. Easton and Phillipsburg is very unique in a lot of ways. And it's also, I guess, it fits what I guess I would say the ideal of a high school football rivalry should be. You have two towns that are right across the Delaware River from each other. So yeah, it's interstate. It's actually the oldest interstate Thanksgiving Day rivalry in America. They started playing in 1905. They've played 114 times. So, you have that across the river kind of feel, even though they're different states. Both tremendous programs. Easton's the second winningest team in the history of Pennsylvania. Phillipsburg's one of the winningest teams in the history of New Jersey. Tremendous rivalry there. Phillipsburg hasn't won since 2014. So as we'll see in some of these rivalries, one team might have the upper hand, especially when we get to the third game on our list. So anybody in a certain part of the state might get a hint of what I'm going to be talking about there. But, it's a game that still commands a ton of attention. It was actually the first game ever nationally televised, the first high school football game ever nationally televised. It was broadcast nationally in 1988. And it's been in Sports Illustrated, ESPN. They played at Lafayette College because of seating. It's on Thanksgiving morning, which adds to kind of that rivalry flair, I think. And you look at the stands at Lafayette, you're looking at an FCS stadium that's full to watch two high school teams on a Thanksgiving morning. And so the passion is there. The fan support is absolutely there. And I think one of the coolest things about this game is Easton's a tremendous program. And there have been numerous years where Easton has had to play in a state quarterfinal, state semifinal, the Saturday, 2 days after this game, and they have still played Phillipsburg. And they don't send their JVs out. They play Phillipsburg.
I was going to ask you about that because I'm like, I know the last probably 15 years, the state format has been, that Black Friday, Saturday after Thanksgiving is, usually the semifinals or the, inter-district plays start. So I was going to ask about it. So they're playing a couple games in a week just to get this one in.
It's kind of an unspoken thing where, if Easton makes it that far, and it's not an every year thing, but with Easton, it's often, that they're able to make it deep a lot of years. But it's kind of an unspoken thing that they'll play Saturday, usually Saturday night, from recollection. But yeah, they're playing Thursday morning, and then they're playing a game again Saturday night. So you're talking two games in about a 36-hour span. I guess it's about 50-hour span, but that's a lot. But that's how much this game means. And they're, again, like I said, it's not like Easton's gonna put out their backups, and Phillipsburg gets put in the same boat too some years. And they're not putting their JVs out there. They're not kind of no offense to the JV kids, but they're not kind of cheapening the rivalry by just playing it just to play it. They're playing it to win, and then 2 days later playing in the state quarters, state semis, whatever it may be, to continue their season. So I think that's been a pretty cool thing about this rivalry.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And you talk about our friends in Mechanicsburg being mad at Alquippa. I mean, I can imagine what they're doing if they got a playoff game and they've got a team playing, 24, 36 hours before it. But
absolutely
different. Sure, they've had their contentions too, but that's a pretty cool thing if they kept the tradition going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've played every year. Easton has a slight edge in the series. I have it at 67, 42, and 5. But again, Easton's a great program. Phillipsburg is too. It's not just a show up and win. And like any other rivalry, you have a situation where no matter what, like you get to that game and it can be 9-1, 1-9, and who knows what could happen. And that's a mark of a true rivalry. And the one thing I did want to add in and kind of shoehorn in was there's another good rivalry in the state that's an interstate rivalry that doesn't get nearly the attention that Easton Peaburg gets. But up in District 9, Bradford plays Olean, New York. If anybody's familiar with where Bradford is, You look for a place that snows about 47 weeks out of the year. That's Bradford, and where the Zippo factory is. And Bradford's like 5 miles from the New York border, and Olean's right on the other side. And they've played every year since 1893, and that's the oldest interstate rivalry in America between public schools, and it's the second oldest overall. So you're talking about a game that's played every year. And yeah, I mean, the schools are probably 15 miles apart, but when you're talking about that kind of commitment, when you try to juggle like one state scheduling versus another state scheduling to be able to play that every year, it takes a little bit extra work. So, Bradford and Olean is kind of Easton Peaburg Jr. in some ways, but it's a cool rivalry that I wanted to highlight as well.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one because Bradford is not tremendously far from us. They actually were playing in the District 10 playoffs up here for a few years. I think they still are. They're participating as District 10.
Yeah, but they're kind of in no man's land. And
yeah, they don't have a lot of big schools up in Pennsylvania, up in that area. So they come towards Erie and Mercer County and Crawford County to play our teams. But yeah, I know I've done some games in Bradford. And you're right. It's a much higher elevation than I'm used to. And it's, in the mountains there, and it gets chilly. So, and Olean's not much different. So
no, not at all.
I didn't realize they played all the way since 1893. That is a long rivalry.
Right. Yeah. And again, it's a big deal, and every school has their rival, and it's a big deal to them. And Easton and Phillipsburg, with good reason, gets a lot of that kind of, more widespread attention, but that doesn't mean that Bradford and Olean isn't just as big of a deal to the people in those towns. So that's why I think it's kind of number one for me, is just, Easton Peaburg is a game that lots of people know about, and maybe not somebody in Texas or somewhere, but people in surrounding states are familiar with, I think, to some degree, if they follow high school football.
You were talking when you're talking about Easton and Phillipsburg, and the win-loss record being a little more one way towards Easton. That's not uncharted territory. I was talking to an expert from Canton, George Bozica. We were talking about the Massillon and Canton rivalry that goes back in the 1890s, and they have a very similar record. I think one or the other. I think it might have been Massillon had like a 20-year run, but the rivalry, those games, even though they were winning, some of them were 1-point games, or went right down to the last second, and still it's a rivalry. If your fans get all pumped up and the players get all pumped up, and that's the game you mark on your calendar, that's a rivalry.
Absolutely. And so, I think kind of not going too geographically far from Easton and Phillipsburg, from the Lehigh Valley, going maybe an hour or so south. The next rivalry was actually the one that received the most votes on that kind of informal poll I put out. And this surprised me. It didn't surprise me that it showed up, and it doesn't really surprise me that it's on my list, but it surprised me that it got the most votes. But it's Governor Mifflin and Wilson. And so you have two schools that are about 4 miles apart in the Reading area, suburban Reading. For Pennsylvania, it's a relatively newer rivalry because it's only been played since 1946, and a lot of games on this list that I'm going to talk about have been played since prehistory. So, but it's just a great game that has a lot of it's one of the rivalries on this list that carries a pretty good amount of name recognition weight for people who might not be from this area. I mean, you're talking just in the last 30 years, Kerry Collins, Chad Henne, this year, Nick Singleton and Governor Mifflin, who's a Gatorade National Player of the Year. Lots of guys who are well known in the area, and nationally as well. The winner gets the Gursky Lynn Trophy. Mifflin won 42-14 this year, this past fall, I guess. Now we're in 2022, but Mifflin won 42-14, and anybody beating Wilson like that, that's a good team, because Wilson hasn't had a losing season since 1963. And every year you get to see, arguably the two best teams in the Reading area. I know that Berks Catholic and Wyomissing fans would probably be upset with me for saying that, but they're both big schools, and they've been really successful, especially lately. Governor Mifflin's on a really nice run lately. And not like they're a flash in the pan. They've had a really good decade or so. But Wilson's just been perennially a double-digit win team since the 60s. And so
these are 6A teams. And for those of you who not know what we're talking about, in Pennsylvania, we have 6 levels of football, 6A being the largest schools. So these are 6A teams?
Yeah, they're 6A.
Okay.
Governor Mifflin's bounced back and forth between 5 and 6, but you're talking about massive enrollment schools, and so that's why, as good as Wyomissing's been lately, as good as Berks Catholic has been over the, I think maybe 10 years it's existed, it's hard to give anybody the vote over a 5-6A program. So, lots of talent, lots of passion, neighboring districts, as most of these rivalries are. So a really good rivalry out in Berks County.
I think we're going to pause the brakes right here on this podcast. And this is such a great interview. And we have talked about so much information with the Pennsylvania high school football historian that and his great website that he has going on at PAFBhistory.com is the name of the website. And you can also go find him on Twitter, PAFB History, at PAFB History. So, just a very interesting historian and some great football from my home state. And, we hope you really enjoyed this episode where we got to talk about 2 great rivalries from Pennsylvania. Easton, Pennsylvania, Easton High School against Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and the great games that we talked about there with their rivalry, and Governor Mifflin and Wilson. And when we come back a couple days from now, we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to end up probably making this like 3 or 4 parts here because it's really in depth, and we want to make sure we cover it and have some good content here. But when we come back on next edition, we are going to be talking about the rivalry of Shamokin and Mount Carmel, as well as Bellwood Antis and Tyrone. 2 great rivalries. And then, of course, we got some other great ones we're going to talk about after that. And it's all based on the PAFootballhistory.com's audit that they set out of what are the greatest high school football rivalries in the state of Pennsylvania, and he had thousands of responses, and these are the results that we got to talk about today. And we're glad that he chose us, and we're glad that you chose us too here on the Pigskin Dispatch to talk about the portal of positive football history. What's a better thing than great high school rivalries? And we're hoping to do a lot more of this because we told you we want to cover football at all levels, and we're real excited that we had this opportunity. So we're going to share you with the rest of this interview in coming episodes over the next week or so. So stay tuned, and till tomorrow, everybody, have a great gridiron day. Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskinddispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskinddispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandham at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.